I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read in
And
the
I'm going to talk
scripture.
about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
Remembered
invited.
at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative.
And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is just a bit of a trigger warning.
Just a bit.
For those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones, I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. Today, former New Ager, Gwendolyn Christopher Rodriguez, boy, that's a lot of names, joins us to talk about how deeply the New Age has infiltrated the church, and it seems like few notice or even care. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie, baby.
I have not been traded, nor have I been put on waivers. Yes, greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, saw its shadow, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is Retouched by an Angel. If your gospel bothers you, just have it retouched by an angel. A new adventure every week. And our guest, well, first let's go to the regular legal disclaimer so I can start reading it. Our guest on today's webcast, insert name here, that will be Gwendolyn Christopher Rodriguez, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinion regarding this satirical content. Our regular announcements. Notice the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or it annoys you and you want to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And never fear. Just don't do it. Don't fear. This webcast is Y2K compliant. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels. Here comes the fake applause. It's actually fake applause, because the real fake applause, we're just too cheap to buy fake applause, so I have to fake it. Okay. Greetings, Gwendolyn. So I take it you don't object to our satire or silliness, and you have no concern.
No, not a bit.
And you have no concern for your personal reputation.
We put out the disclaimer because we're not ever sure if the guest has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
So we just want to alert everybody.
It's funny because I'll ask Don later, do you think he was annoyed by our jokes, or he or she? And Don said, oh, no, he tells us he loves them. But it'll be one of these guests who just sits there like stoically and never laughs or cracks a smile. You have already smiled once. My job is finished here.
Yeah, so, you're done. Now you can go off happy for the day.
Now I've accomplished everything I can to do.
Story. A good friend of mine just passed away. Pastor Richard Fisher was one of my mentors. Smart, dedicated pastor. One of the few who really loved Defense of the Faith. Voracious reader. I think he'd read like 2 books a week, and
he latched onto Gothard before we did, didn't he? He
did. He had already been writing a couple of things, and he was really quite helpful with that. But we met him at a Witness Now for Jesus convention, and then when we started a radio program, I asked him to be on as one of our first guests, and we thought this guy has no sense of humor. Joy and I are cutting up, carrying on, doing like we always do, and nothing. And I saw him sometime later. We were talking about that. He goes, well, I was serious. I was dealing with serious stuff, and I don't laugh when I do serious stuff. So you can't always tell.
Yeah.
So Ms. Gwendolyn Rodriguez. That's so.
Rodriguez.
Do you have to like have extra long checks for that name?
I think you should get. Oh, did we unmute? Oh, are you muted? Or
No,
Okay.
I don't know.
She's
Am I
not
You look
gonna
like
muted?
you
respond
were
to that.
laughing. You look like you were
Yes,
laughing. But I didn't
I
hear
tell
anything.
people that I go by Gwendolyn just to give people a hard time. It's easy to stop at just Gwen, and sometimes my husband goes Gwen Dolan because he forgets.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's called To 1,000 Generations.
Is that the URL to 1,000 generations? Because that's actually
I believe so.
It is,
actually
and
longer
it's
than
in
your
the
name, I think.
description below.
That's actually longer than your name. If you had Gwendolyn Christopher Rodriguez, that might be shorter as a URL. So to 1,000 generations. Okay.
That's right.
And it's in the description. Thanks, Don.
So, what made you name it that, To 1,000 Generations? Just out of curiosity.
Well, because of God's blessings. And I was in a place when I was in the New Age and just recently and came out of it where I just felt the heaviness of sin and doing things the wrong way. And I thought, well, yes, there are curses for doing things the wrong way, but God is so gracious and good that he blesses to 1,000 generations those who love him. And so I thought that was appropriate.
I like that. I like that. So I want to be careful because there are certain things that you didn't necessarily want to get into. And so to avoid tripwires, I'm going to kind of let you lead the story. How did you get involved with the New Age and what led you out? And I want to preface it with this. I have several former New Agers I have been helping, working with, discipling along, if you will. And each of them came to the faith, in these cases at least, because they had some familiarity with Christianity and they became concerned about someone or several someones in their life that weren't Christians. And so they were trying to reach them for Christ and then realized they weren't Christians. And they were in the church.
They realized they were Christians, or
they were not Christians.
That they were not Christians. Yes.
Right.
Well, right. I started out fully believing that I was a Christian and felt like I was saved when I was 27 and was a part of, I think, a very conservative denomination, and fell in love with theology. Looking back, I realized I loved theology a lot more than I loved Jesus. I was always a bookworm and would always study things. And so what happened is I had my son, who was 5 at the time, and he got attacked by a dog. And he got very emotionally depressed and traumatized by that whole thing. And I just wanted to find a way to help him. And so someone at church told me about essential oils. And so this essential oils was the road that I went down that led me into the New Age. And New Age medicine is the health branch of the New Age. The New Age is much bigger than just things dealing with health. But that's how I got involved with it. I went to a class, and these classes were always free. And the thing that it was just appealing because I had seen how medicine could fail people. And I had always called myself Little Miss Side Effect. And I was hearing in these essential oil classes that these oils had no side effects. You couldn't be allergic to them. And there was story after story of these miraculous healings. And it wasn't just physical, it was emotional. And some would say even spiritual. So I was intrigued. And being the book kind of learner that I was, a bookworm, I wanted to study things. I did look into essential oils, but what I did is I went down one way. I went down the path of recommended reading that I was given. And there were hundreds of books. There's hundreds of websites. So you think that you're getting all this really good information, but it was actually just one side.
So it's more or less kind of just a large echo chamber where you're getting the same information from multiple sources, but it's still just the same information.
Exactly. And I would have to say that as I'm thinking about it, one of the reasons that I got so involved with it was ignorance of what real science is.
Right.
And falling for the pseudoscience and the philosophy that was behind much of this new age medicine and the oils.
So you experienced all the healings they promised, right?
I experienced things that I thought were miraculous.
Like
when
give an example.
Okay, so an example, like with my son, I consulted with one of the leaders in this. It was an essential oil company, and she was in this company. She was also on the side giving consultations. And she told me, okay, you need this, and this essential oil, and you need to put it on certain places on your son. You need to do it at certain times of the day. You need to say certain things. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I thought of this as just an area of knowledge that I just didn't know anything about. And now I was learning about it. So I told my son, come on here, lie down. I'm going to put these oils on you. And when he got up from that, it was miraculous. I felt like I had my son back. And I was sold 100%.
Can I ask what he was suffering from?
Yes. So before that, he was traumatized. So he had the dog bite, and he felt like the world was a dangerous place. He didn't want to go outside, and he started asking me if things were poisonous. And if he touched something, he said, is that poison? Am I going to die? And he wasn't sleeping at night. We had to swaddle him up in his blankets so that he would fall asleep. And then a little bit later, when his arms came out of his blankets, he would start crying for us again. So we weren't sleeping. And I thought, I'm going to have to medicate this child. I'm going to have to take him to psychotherapy. I don't know what to do. And the oils seemed like they rescued him. It felt like they saved him. I felt like I got my son back.
I take it he was very young at the time.
He was 5.
And
yeah, he was very young.
Your oldest?
No, he's my youngest, and he's 19 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the reason I asked if he was your oldest is because you were already an experienced parent then.
Right.
Right. So when you look back on it, I mean, I had one child, so I don't have that spectrum of experience that you would have. But the only thing I can think of is that he must have been different from your other kids in terms of how he was traumatized.
He was a more emotional child, and he did have the disadvantage of having an older brother who told him about rabies and told him that he was actually in danger of dying from things outside. So he was kind of tormented as a child.
He had a typical older brother, in other words.
Yes.
All right, yes. So he's attacked by a dog and by a brother who tells him, by the way, you're going to die because of rabies.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, poor kid.
So I would look back on this, and tell me if you do too, and look at, here was an example of probably what was best explained by simply the resilience of kids. He bounced back. But you thought it was because of the essential oils.
I did. Yes.
Could I suggest something else, and maybe both of you can comment on this?
Mm-hmm.
Could it have just been the power of belief that brought him back? I say that because, for example, I remember when my kids were young, and one of them would get hurt, and Joy would kiss their boo-boo, and they would be better.
Yeah, but okay. In other words, he
Change
was trusting
anything.
what mom
I,
gave
I
him.
do
Yeah.
think that could be a factor of just the power of suggestion, that here is something that someone says is going to work and is going to help you.
Placebo
But I
effect.
think there's actually something else too behind it. And this is something that I saw in my years dealing with this, is I saw things that really were unexplainable. And I felt like it was an illusion created and demonic in character. Enough health, enough of a healing to be a lure and to be a draw, and to have someone think, oh, well, maybe this is going to work. Now later, most every single thing, every event like that, there would be a regression. There would be, the problem would come back. I mean, there may be like a temporary stay, either or that, or that maybe it seemed to go away, but then something else worse would come along. And so it was then you had this constant need to revisit, okay, well, then how can I take care of this? Or how can I take care of that? And because the answer was right around the corner, you just had to figure out which thing to say was going to be the right thing.
Sounds like an incantation when you say you have to say a particular thing.
Yes. And that is something that was, a part of, so most of the people that I hung around in this company and the friends that I made, I would have considered, they would consider themselves Christians. And they believed 100% that these were God's medicine. And so going back to like what you're saying, there was this real syncretism, maybe that's the word, of biblical ideas, biblical concepts, saying things, belief, the power of belief, the power of, we even think of the thing, have a creation type thing, creating reality like a God, like you had the power of a God. Like one of the mentors that I had in the group wrote a book and was talking about when Jesus was healing, and said, there was one town where he couldn't heal. And this is their explanation. They say Jesus could only lay hands on a few sick people who received healing. He marveled at their unbelief. The power of the negative energy field around his country stopped his faith for healing. Now, this is a book about essential oils and using them.
Sure.
But
yeah, and now that also sounds like word faith, something Kenneth Copeland would say, for example, is you are claiming the sickness or you're claiming your healing, you are speaking it into existence essentially by your spoken word and belief.
Yeah, so it's hard in my situation to see any sharp lines between the New Age, between word of faith, new thought, and even the occult, and even in divination and things like that, because not only did we use essential oils, and what you were saying was saying certain things, because we were told that the power of the essential oil could be harnessed and directed more if we used our thoughts and our intentions or prayed. Praying was a way to make these oils work more, and that these oils, when they went into our body, could actually delete misinformation and restore God's blueprint of his intended design in our body.
Wow, these are powerful potions.
That
require,
whereas Copeland would say that faith is a force, and the words are the containers of the force. In this instance, the liquid in the bottles are the containers of the force that you're speaking into them.
Yes, they were God's molecules.
Wow.
Yeah. So have you seen any of these kinds of teachings work their way into churches, especially in the form of like seminars and
Well,
classes and things like that?
well, yes, and I was a vehicle to do that. What I did was I was so interested in this. I was such a believer in it that any course or any certification that I could get, I got. I went into numerous churches and gave classes. And there's a book called The Healing Oils of the Bible that was by a Methodist pastor. He had one semester of medical school, and he wrote this 800-page book.
Sounds like
This is
Henry
it.
Wright.
This
Wow.
is David Stewart. I know Henry
Oh.
Wright. I had his book too. Yeah.
I talked to him personally once and told him
Wow.
what I thought.
So David Stewart started what was called the Raindrop certification, and it was from the founder of the company had created something called raindrop therapy, where drops of, and he combined shamanistic beliefs of energy fields and the techniques that shamans would do with their fingers and the touch that they had on people. And so I taught these things. I went into churches. I went into several churches. I actually even gave the sermon for a Unitarian Universalist church.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of church.
Yeah. But I went into
Evangelical
different churches. Yeah.
like
And would
some evangelical?
yes, but only as calling it like a Bible study.
Mm-hmm.
And not as part of a service.
You called it a Bible study. How much of the Bible did you teach in that or study?
Well, quite a bit, because the claim of David Stewart in his Healing Books of the Bible was that almost all the references of oils in the Old and New Testament were essential oils. That's what they call them. And of course, if I had done even a little bit of study, I could have realized that the distillation process didn't even start until 1000 AD or
Right.
past that.
Right. But it was essential that you believed in the essential oil.
It was. And so to the accurate thing is that olive oil was the oil mentioned in the Old Testament.
Right.
You can take resins like frankincense, the chunks of resin of that, put them in olive oil and it'll infuse a little bit. You could do that with myrrh. So you could get something that was a precious oil. So, but I didn't know that. I wasn't thinking that. I'm in these Bible studies and I'm passing around these little bottles of essential oils saying, look, this is what was given to Mary and Joseph for baby Jesus. This was their medicine cabinet. And when the apostles went out and laid hands and anointed people with oil, they were using essential oils, and that's why the people were healed. I was saying this, and we had our Bibles out, and we would turn to different verses talking about hyssop and all that kind of stuff. And I would have my hyssop oil. Of course, there was no hyssop oil in the Bible, but I'm telling people that there was, and believing it sincerely.
Wow.
So that's not where it ended, though, with essential oils. I take it progressed on from there.
It did progress, and it went on to using gadgets. I just wanted to mention this too. And
I love gadgets.
Gadgets are one of the favorite things in the new age. Electronic gadgets, things that will give you readouts of different things. Read your auras or things like that. And
is there an app for that, by the way?
Oh yes, actually there was an app for it.
I believe it.
Yeah. So there was devices. People could hold this device, and I could, within 60 seconds with my app and my computer, I could print out a whole list of oils that they needed for different things. Now, our reference book would say what we tell them, oh, because we're not supposed to diagnose and prescribe, right? So we would
Right.
have them basically do it themselves. And in our reference books, there would be the oil, and then there would be its uses for the body, then its uses for the mind, and its uses for the spirit. So that's how we were able to have them. And I had people burst into tears because they would look something up and they would say, this is it. This is what I'm dealing with.
Right.
For example, I had someone who had a tumor on their pineal gland. And one of the oils that came up was an oil. Its first use said for the brain, especially the pineal gland. And I had oils that would come up for pregnancy. And the woman would say, I haven't told anybody that I'm pregnant. So there were things that were so weird that we would just kind of grow silent and think, this is God. He's telling us what, this is his work.
Yeah, we have a similar thing happening with the Enneagram, another spiritual tool coming from the
Yes.
occult.
Yes.
And I'll talk with people and I go, but it was so accurate. It really described me to a T and why I do things and why I can't get along with my spouse and why. And then I would have to point out, well, okay, but it's not supposed to be telling you any of that. They tell
Right.
you it's not about your personality. It's about your false identity that you've crafted and your need to get on the right path back to the realization that you're not a sinner separated from God. Well, they're invested at this point, so they don't want to hear that.
Yes. Yes. Well, I wanted to go into, so going deeper, one of the things that I did, because in order to do the raindrop technique, I could give it away, but I was using about 100 drops of oil, and that was expensive. So in order to legally charge for these services, I had to have some kind of license. I couldn't have a medical license, but I
Okay.
could have a spiritual license, and
A
I could practice it
spiritual.
as a religious belief, and I could charge for that. So I studied, spent bunch of money. I mean, all these things I did cost a lot to become a licensed spiritual healer.
So you're kind of like a Christian Science. What's the word I want to use?
Practitioner.
Pardon?
Practitioner.
Practitioner. That's the word.
Yeah.
Christian Science
Right.
practitioner. So they're licensed as a practitioner, but they can't give actual health diagnoses.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And there was another thing I could charge for, and it was called the aroma freedom technique. And this was a way of breathing essential oils, saying things, and visualization. And that was supposed to help people with deep trauma. And that appealed to me because of things in my past, how I lost my brother to suicide, and just some other things that I felt like I needed some healing for. And so I would be able to charge for that type of service too. I would be able to charge for anything dealing with essential oils with this license. But interestingly, the people that were in the class with me, this was an online class, they were from all kind of walks of life. And there were some that I was like, wow, these people are really far out there. These are new agers, and I'm not a new ager. I'm helping people, know Jesus and get healed by him. But one of the things that made me pause for a minute, unfortunately, not for very long, was something called muscle testing. And in this particular muscle testing thing, instead of a device telling you this random information, or sometimes this very accurate information, I would use my body as the way to get the information, and I could teach them how to use their body to get the information. So basically I became my own Ouija board.
Your own Ouija board.
How'd that work?
That's interesting. Very portable.
So there's very portable. Yes, very important. And there were different ways to do it. I'm not going to explain how to do it. I think because I don't even want to go there anymore. But what I could do is I could hold a bottle of essential oil, and I could have, there was a way that I could test it, and it was through weakness or strength of part of my body. I could get yes and no answers. I could find out how many drops of oil I needed, how often I needed it. So that was the application that I would use it for. And I would teach people how they could use it for that. In the class, when we were learning about this technique, we were told, you can use this beyond your health care that you're doing with people. Why don't you have somebody in your family, a friend, hide an object in your house? And you can use this technique on your body to find out where that object is.
Okay.
Now, I never did that.
To be a psychic reader in a sense.
Exactly. So your body would have, because your body is the source of all truth, right? And so it can even go beyond what oil you need. It can go on to, whatever kind of information you want, you could probably get it. So that in a way that sounded, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That sounds a little bit weird. I'm just going to use the application for, the purposes that I have.
Yeah. Now, you might not know this, but I like to go to New Age fairs, angel channeling fairs, those kinds of things. And I meet all sorts of people who are involved with these sorts of practices, believe they're getting information from angels. Doreen Virtue, our friend Doreen Virtue, was an angel channeler, one of the high-profile ones. And one of our sponsors, though, also trucks in this area.
Well, it's really, it involves people's lives and stories of people that, it's kind of fictionalized, but we'll talk about them anyways. You see, Cynthia's life is in crisis. She doesn't know if she can believe she's a sinner. How will she break the news to her parole officer? Jacob is still in shock. His pastor laughed when he suggested he might be the reincarnation of Elvis. Will he ever find a church that supports his spiritual views? Charity is engaged to Brad, who is already married to Betsy. There won't be a problem in Brad and Betsy's polygamous cult, but Charity wonders how this will all work out in the afterlife. All these people have one thing in common. They're looking for a gospel that's been retouched by an angel. If your gospel bothers you, have it retouched with a new adventure every week. Consult local listing for details. So don't forget to tune in to Retouched by an Angel. It just keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Right. Your very own gospel. You can be retouched by an angel.
Yes. So only the names have been changed to protect the guilty. So
exactly.
All
So
right.
you have your own private bodily Ouija board. You can teach people and train people how to use their body to gain spiritual insights and find stuff hidden in closets along the way.
Yeah.
Now, during this time, are you attending a church during your New Age year?
Yes, I was attending church. I was walking around in my flowy clothes and my earthy jewelry, and you could smell me a mile away.
Really?
Because I used to have people tell me, I knew you were here. I could smell you, which is usually not a good thing. And but I was covered in oils, and that was a way of advertising too.
What kind of church was this that you were attending?
This was a Reformed Presbyterian church.
Oh, really? I mean, a conservative.
And
it wasn't PCUSA,
yes,
was
yes.
it? It was PCA?
No, it was a PCA. It was a PCA.
Really?
Church.
Did anybody confront you?
And no one did. And I even mentioned in Sunday school one time that I had been to a healing conference. I went to a Todd White conference
Oh my.
in Dallas. And yeah. Yeah,
See, I
I
don't
did
even
that
really know who
too.
Todd White is, but Don does. So who's Todd White?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do. He's one of the big word faith guys, and
yeah.
very, very, very popular. Weird hair.
So, like, did you
Yeah.
ever attend a Bible study at that church?
I
And
did, and I in one of my small groups, I told the story of how I had used essential oils and felt like it had freed me from PTSD, and I told that story. I didn't have anybody question me about it, and I even when I was getting the license and the certificate, well, it was the certifications for the raindrop technique. I had to practice on a lot of people, and I had to do. I asked people, "Hey, can I practice
Practice
on
on you.
you?"
Hmm.
And sure, they said sure. And the aroma freedom technique, sure. I mean, I even did a session with an elder, and
wow. So, is this the same church you're in now, or is it a
no,
different?
it isn't.
Okay.
It
So,
isn't.
so
Yeah.
did so no one ever saw any red flags or anything?
I wouldn't say that because I do think people did, but I didn't have anybody confront me. I did have someone tell me that they knew something was wrong.
Hmm.
I had given them Henry Wright's A More Excellent Way book to
Oh
read,
no!
Oh my
and
goodness. Yeah.
that one too. And they said, oh, I couldn't read that, and they just gave it back to me. And they said, I'm sorry, and I couldn't read it. And I was thinking to myself, man, they're really missing out.
We
So did,
wrote on that book. We
oh yeah.
used it in our book on Bill Gothard because Bill
Mhm.
Gothard loved this guy.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah,
the answer to all of your physical ills. We went, how could anyone read
There's
this?
a demon for every
yeah,
disease. And so,
yeah.
did you become a member of this church?
Yes,
You went through membership
yes,
classes.
yes,
You signed on to the Westminster Stand. Well, you don't actually have to in
yes,
PCA churches. You don't have to
yeah. But
subscribe.
I would say my complete ignorance really of the Bible and what it really said was a contributing factor to this. I mean, I literally lived um, Genesis 3. Like that was me. It was when like here when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. So my version of this is, my son needed emotional help. I saw that oil was desirable for my family, so I took some. I gave it to him. I believed that it was good for the body, helpful to the emotions, and it would advance the mind. So, I mean,
Well,
I just lived that out. And
Yeah.
I think that's just lived over and over and over as I shared these with the people in my church. I had over 100 people just in my local area that were a part of my quote unquote organization of
well,
oils. I was winning trips. I was winning prizes. I was advancing in rank. I was getting limousine rides. Life was good. It was like everything I touched was turning to gold, and I was speaking things. I was saying these I am things. When I would work on people, I could do this one thing and legs would lengthen. And everybody saw it, and it was like, whoa. And the person could feel it as they walked around. It wasn't a sleight of hand. It was real, and it happened. And I didn't know how it happened, but I could feel pulsating power coming out of my hands when I worked on people. I could put my hands past them over their back, and I could see almost patterns in their back, and would ask them questions about that. And so things were going pretty good.
So what changed?
well, before you answer that, I want to raise something else so that those who are viewing don't think that this is just an obscure, okay, this happened at that church.
Right.
Mhm.
Ron Hensel and I have a friend. She actually is one of the researchers and writers on New Age in medicine, Janice Lyons, and she was part of a PCA church that brought in a new pastor and his wife. And within fairly short time, the wife has started a study group on Facebook, kind of a closed group. And she had been invited. Well, they started ridiculing an article written about New Age medicine that this pastor's wife was engaged with. And Janice said, well, I wrote that article. And so then that started this whole issue of the church where some of the church leadership was defending the pastor's wife as, yes, this is solidly biblical, orthodox, no problem, in a Presbyterian church. Beth McCord, Presbyterian, starts the Enneagram, teaching it in a Presbyterian church. So now I say that to say this. Let me rephrase this. The Presbyterian churches I'm familiar with are really quite solid, good, solid pastors, good teaching elders. Ron's part of one of them. However, they, like so many others in the Christian faith, trust their people and other resources to keep them out of following false teaching.
And I want to be, a lot of people, even now, still are not aware of the differences between the mainline PCUSA church and the
Correct.
other.
Correct.
There's a whole group, really, of Presbyterian churches, the biggest of which is the PCA. There's also the EPC, and there are others. We're talking about, those are conservative groups. And we're talking about something that did not happen in the liberal PCUSA, which at one time I was barely even aware that there were conservative Presbyterians, especially when I lived in the Chicago area. It took me a while to realize that. But we're talking about something that did not happen in the PCUSA, which would have been probably, understandable. It's like pretty much anything goes in the PCUSA, and I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not trying to attack them. I think they would see that as hyperbole, just to make that statement. And yes, it is. But they really are they would not have a problem, I don't think, with New Age medicine in the PCUSA. But in the PCA and other conservative Presbyterian denominations, they should have a major problem with it.
They should have, but as you and I know, all really solid, what we would normally consider solid conservative groups are doing battles with a lot of different New Age, critical race theory, New Age medicine practices, those sorts of things. And it befuddles me why that happens, but we're seeing it.
Well, I
and
think
progressives are growing in those circles.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a word, trusted, people that you trust. And that was the case with me. I trusted these people. I believed that they were sincere Christians. I believe that they were sincere. I truly do. I believe that they love Jesus. I believe that. And I trusted them. And I, in turn, was trusted by people.
Right.
They saw me as someone that tried to do research, tried to study, and I was sincere. I believed I was helping people, but I did notice something, and looking back on it. So when you really feel like you are in charge of your health, and that there is salvation by these words or these methods, and if someone doesn't want to listen to you and doesn't want to do what you are telling them actually works, well, then you pretty much think that their problems are their fault.
Right.
They're sick, and too bad. I felt my heart shrinking and growing colder. And I just scrolled past prayer requests. Why am I going to pray for that person? They brought it on themselves. That isn't evil. And that's one of the things that I really repented of.
So in your mind, how did they bring it on themselves again?
Well, they either spoke it by being negative, or they had the opportunity to get better because I was going to show them how they could use this oil to get better, but they weren't interested. So then it became their problem.
Yeah, I have shared this before, and this has to do with word faith, but it's the same kind of a principle. I was a volunteer chaplain at a small hospital years ago, And they brought in a guy in an ambulance. He was maybe late 40s, early 50s. He died of cancer, and he was en route to the hospital when he passed away. And his wife came in, and I went to be with her, kind of walk through, here's what we need to do next. And as I walked up, she looks at me, she says, I don't want to talk to you. Your God lied to me. Now, never met her before, had no idea what she was talking about. Her parents had followed her in and took me to the side and said, here's what's going on, just so you know. We need to pray for her. They had been to a Kenneth Copeland rally and healing crusade, and they have been told that if he takes the medications and the treatments, he's claiming the illness instead of claiming the healing. What he had was highly curable, 95% cure rate. I mean, it was really up there. But he stopped all medications, procedures, etc., started claiming the healing, and within a year, he had passed away. So the claiming the healing didn't work, and in fact was detrimental to them instead. Now, is that at all what you ran into, and those kinds of things?
Yeah, it was. It was a little bit like that, for sure. I think it was not knowing the Bible, and here it is. I was looking for not knowing definitions. Okay, so when you study the Bible, I know that you should use historical, grammatical, inductive type of study. Well, of course, I didn't do any of that. But if I had even read verses like Deuteronomy 18:9 through 12, okay, and I knew that. You knew you weren't supposed to consult someone, a spiritist, or someone who consults the dead or casts spells. But what I was doing was exactly these things. I mean, I was practicing divination. Divination is just using something to get information. That's not, it's by spirits, and it's not through prayer or reading the Bible. So I was basically practicing divination. Interpreting omens, that's kind of like what I was doing on someone's back, and just reading the body. We were told that we could do things on the hands and the feet, and that's very Eastern, that's very New Age, of thinking that the part is a reflection of the whole. Like there's the whole person in the hand, or the whole person is in the foot, and you can read that and work on it. Just like the stars are kind of you in outer space, like a bigger version of you. So there's that's a New Age thing. Well, also being a charmer, that's the law of attraction. That's trying to draw things to you. Casting spells is trying to speak something into existence, trying to make something happen by the words or your thoughts. So had I really knew the Bible, it would have been a guard and a hedge and a protection for me.
Right. That is really key. That's very important. And one of the things that we try to emphasize, I mean, I get mixed sometimes, because I do tend sometimes to pick on pastors and elders who I think should know better. But then I have to remember, okay, they have a really tough task. They have a lot to do with their congregation, and they can't keep up with what's going on out there in culture and in society. So they really do need to have, people like yourself. I've been there. I know what this is like, that can alert them. Okay, this is coming into church, and here's why it's dangerous. Or ministries like ours to say, that's what we spend our life doing, is reading what's going on out there that we need to be aware of. How do we guard the flock?
Yeah.
Because pastors need help, and yet many of them refuse the help. That's a problem.
So,
well, when I discovered that I was actually a New Ager, and I discovered it through a guest that you've had on your show, Melissa Doherty, and one of her YouTube videos. Since this was my business tree, meaning my business ministry, and I was going to help people find Jesus through it, I thought, well, what better way but to watch YouTube videos of New Agers who've come to Christ? And hers was one that I watched, and I was immediately convicted.
Well,
I mean, immediately drop on the floor. I'm broken.
Really?
Yes.
How long ago was
I
this?
realized this was in 2019.
So
This was April 2019.
you were watching one of her videos?
I was watching one of her videos, and it was about the law of attraction. And I had been using the law of attraction, even as the law of attraction. And that was the first conviction. And then I started watching more, and it was just a domino effect of all this that I'm doing is wrong. And
Wow.
the occult. And
So
I didn't.
We're talking about 3 years ago.
Yes.
Okay. So, oh, wow. And so, how did you feel? I mean, sounds like I would have probably gone into shock for a while.
Well, I did. Well, and I kind of do. It was sort of a cage stage thing where everywhere I looked, I thought the world was on fire. You know,
Okay.
this is because I started reading, and as I do, you know, trying to learn a lot, I just binged on all these videos of all these different new age things, and realized then that led me to the Enneagram, you know, finding out that has occult roots, and just so many things that yoga. I didn't know any of that and all these overlapping things like spiritual direction.
Oh, yeah.
And that area. So
I took a class in that in a seminary once before like how did the Christians around you discover your change? Did you let them know? How did that work?
I did, but people just really didn't want to hear what I had to say. And
Interesting.
And I went to tell my pastor, and after an hour of telling just all these things like I've told you of what I got into, and just my conviction that it was wrong, and that I felt so broken, but I knew I was different. I knew that the person that got up from that floor after watching the video didn't have the same heart as a person before. I didn't want anything. Of course, I lost all my income. I lost all those friends.
Wow. So you went to your pastor and basically said, this reminds me of the story in the book of Acts when the Ephesian Christians burned their magic books.
I did. I burned books.
They professed Christianity. The question is, were they really believers until that moment?
Right.
I mean, how can you have your foot in both worlds? And it dawned on them they couldn't. And so I'll leave it up to the Lord to figure out who was really a Christian and who wasn't. But if I were a pastor and somebody like you came to me, my question would be, how did she get into membership here? How did we let that happen as the shepherds of this flock? I take it you didn't get that kind of a response.
No. At the end of my story, he made some kind of offhand remark about my number on the Enneagram.
Oh no.
And I had I'm brand new out of the New Age, but I had just read about the Enneagram, and I said, "Oh, that's from the occult." And he didn't say anything, and then suggested at another time maybe we could talk about the nuances of that.
Oh, the nuances.
Yeah, but then I did find out that at that time he was studying to be a spiritual director, and he is one now.
Oh, okay. We're seeing a lot of that. Just a side note, Chris Matthias asked a question, and I thought we could run it by you and then go back on. Did Gwen ever encounter folks who had a negative reaction to the oils, like an allergic reaction? If so, how did she respond and explain to the clients?
Well, I didn't ever have anybody come back to me until after the fact. But someone did come back to me one time and said that after a treatment that I had done on them, that they broke out with scabs and almost oozing sores. And I said, you should have told me, you should have said something to me. We were told that that was good, though, that meant the toxins were leaving the body. I mean, that was what we were told.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
recently heard that inflation's good too. Uh, so all these things that we used to think were bad, things that were riots, they were really just peaceful protests mostly.
Yeah. Okay.
So-
yeah. Well,
So
let's not get too
one of
political
the-
here. We can do that
one of
later.
the main things was that since this was natural, that equaled safe. We were told that natural equals safe. But after getting out of this, I realized the most dangerous things in the world are natural.
Exactly.
Think about like, oh, I think I'm going to rub up against that poison ivy. That's natural. Think of hemlock. Think of just all the things that are deadly. We never talked about that, but that's kind of a
Yeah, well, I go
ironic.
swimming in the Gulf. Sharks are natural.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Now,
right.
I want to kind of guide back here of something that you raised a few minutes ago and said maybe we could revisit, and maybe we could do a whole program on that in the future with you and perhaps one or two others, even New Agers, because this is, I have to tell you, there's not a week that goes by that I don't get a phone call or an email from a New Ager that's now a Christian going, how do I find a church? Because the churches in my area that I'm going to, I go there and I like them and they got good worship. They might have, interesting, good teaching from the pulpit. And then all of a sudden I discover they have New Apostolic Reformation music, or they have some other New Age. And you're talking about a pastor who goes, what's your Enneagram number? And he's training to be a spiritual counselor. How did that impact you as recommitting your life to Christ now?
Well, that was 2019. And of course, a year later was 2020 when COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we weren't going to church.
Okay.
Things were online, and then it just felt like the world fell apart. And, but this is an important point. God loves the church. The church is the bride of Jesus. I love the members that are at my church. I love the people. I love the pastor. I love all those people that I lived with and loved all those years. And I pray for them now, but what we did end up doing was going to a different denomination. It was a new denomination, Vanguard Presbyterian Church. We asked for help to start a mission church in our area. And of course it's small. But I think it's worth looking for a solid church.
Yeah.
And God loves his church, and God is not going to leave his bride in disarray. And we have to, I could have just been so overwhelmed by all that I saw and all the felt like deception that seemed to be everywhere. And I could just dismiss it as saying, and say, well, I can't find a church. So that's it. And just walk away and abandon the bride. But we can't do that.
No.
We have to love the church.
You were doing this for how many years now?
From 2008 to 2019.
Okay, so
11 years.
11 years. That's a considerable amount of time, and your family was drawn into it. I mean,
yes.
Your son and others. How has your repenting of this affected them?
Well, the first thing I did was sit down and I typed out, it's 14 pages, single spaced. And,
wow.
and I gave a copy to everyone in my family. I mean, I had young adult children by then. They weren't small. And just poured out my heart and told them I was wrong and I was deceived and I was sorry. And my husband said one of the kindest things ever, because I was torn up, not just because of the time I had wasted, the deception I was under, the things I had done, being a false teacher. I mean, I definitely was a false teacher. the money I'd spent. And he said, if that's what it took to bring you to Christ, then it was worth it.
Praise the Lord. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah,
That's a
definitely.
good way to end our broadcast. What do you say, Don?
I think it is absolutely a terrific way. We might have to have you come
Oh,
back
yeah.
and visit with us in the future.
I would be honored.
It's really important. In your line, God Loves the Church. One of our board of advisors, a good friend of mine I met in 1993 at the Parliament of World Religions. His name is Bill Hunsberger. From time to time calls me just to say, God loves the church, because I get irritated with it.
Good reminder.
Ron, would you care to walk us out of here?
We'll do that. Let's give credit to whom credit is due. Press the button there. Our resident cult leader profiler is Kneel Before Me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D. Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamus. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur, special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, the humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Joe Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Director of Privacy Assurance is Wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happen.
Nobody's done it yet, so
Not so far.
we'll just leave it
Gwen,
there.
thank you so much for joining us. Everybody else, we will
You're
see
welcome.
you
We give the royal wave.
next week.